The boys are back, ready to recap UFC 318, which occurred this past weekend, and I will say that card definitely delivered. We had a lot of finishes. I mean, to start off the card, I believe there was 6 or so finishes in a row. I believe there was 4 or 5 of them in a row, first-round finishes. We had submissions, we had knockouts. But we're going to start off here with the main story of the night. Max Holloway put on an absolute show against Dustin Poirier. Hats off to Dustin Poirier. He's a warrior as well, but Max Holloway was the one to prevail. And I'm going to start with Luke here. My question is going to be, first off, what did you think about the performance that Max Holloway put on? And second off, is Ilia Topuria next for Max Holloway?
Yeah, I was very happy with the performance. We were just kind of touching on it before we kicked the podcast off. I thought he looked great. I think on the judges' scorecard, 4-1 is the correct score. I think I would give Dustin round 2. But if you watch it back, when Max knocked Dustin down in the second, it definitely seemed like he wasn't, not that he's a competitor, so he's always trying to get the win. But I think out of respect for Dustin, he could have had some really hard punches in that exchange when he had him on the ground and kind of let him up and was like, let's put on a show for the fans, which it's just right in line with Max's character, what he did at the end of the fight. But other than that, I think what we talked about, the speed advantage was just on full display. It seemed like he was finding the target a lot. The body work was great. I think he almost doubled his strike output, or doubled Dustin's strike output. But Dustin wanted a war, and that's what he got. I thought it was a great showing, and I'm just happy as a Max fan to see him not go 0-3 in both trilogies in his career. What's next for Max Holloway? Honestly, I'm at like a calm point where I'm not gonna like sit here and be like Ilia's next. Like it has to be Ilia. I think Max just whatever they put up, like he said after the fight, it's up to the UFC. I really like the Dan Hooker fight. I think that's a great fight. It would be a huge BMF title fight. Both those guys are warriors. For an entertainment standpoint, I don't obviously think it does much for Max's career at this point. But Ilia would be awesome too. So we'll just I want to be in a spot where I'm just happy with whatever they give him. And hopefully, he said he's only fighting for 2 more years, just as many bangers as we could get out of him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that fight was obviously a banger. But I like that you touched on that you thought that Max could have finished him a little bit earlier. I definitely agree. I mean, I think in those first 2 rounds, especially when, Dustin was on the floor and Max kind of was just standing on top of him. He kind of walked over instead of, the old shuffle you kind of do towards a fighter when he's down. Because you're kind of rushing to go get that knockdown, right? I mean, somebody's only going to be dazed for so long. So he definitely took his time a little bit getting over to Dustin. And then when he got up as well, they're kind of in the clinch. Max definitely could have thrown a few power shots there, but didn't take advantage of it. Now, obviously I wasn't in the ring. I can't, I don't know how Max is feeling. I don't know if he actually did it on purpose or not. That's just the way it looked to me. But I will say when Dustin jumped that Gilly, I think I was in the middle of a bar and it just erupted, man. I think everybody thought, from the looks of it, it looked like he was going to get that locked in. It looked like, Max's head was just fully in that headlock, but he slipped out. But definitely a worthy fight for a Dustin Poirier retirement. And I think as far as what's next for Max, I think obviously the Dan Hooker fight. But I've been seeing a lot of people mention a Charles and Max Holloway fight. I think that would also be pretty nice. They have kind of some history there as well. I think Charles, had a torn esophagus last time they fought or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was some obscure injury in that fight. So definitely would love to see that one get ran back. And who knows, man, maybe Charles is getting ready to retire soon too. So we'll see.
Yeah, wait, but I mean, sorry for cutting in here. I think he broke something in his arm or tore something in his arm. The esophagus is in your.
I feel like I've heard the esophagus as well, though.
No, I think it was
the arm.
He grabs here when he gets hurt.
Grabs his neck and then falls.
I thought it was something with his arm, but whatever. Go on.
No, I was just gonna say. I mean, you guys pretty much touched it. I just felt like watching that fight outside of like the last 20 or so seconds of round 2. Max just seemed like a step ahead the entire fight in terms of speed. Moving in, ducking and weaving shots. Obviously, he got hit with that one big right hook And then Dustin, he gave the fans what he delivered. He's a beast himself. He said, I'm jumping Gilly. It might not have been in the last 10 seconds and they pointed down, but, he lived up to his word. He jumped the Gilly. That was electric. And then in terms of, I think you could do 3 fights. The 2 you touched on, Dan Hooker, Charles Oliveira. And then if you want, just in terms of where the lightweight division is now, you don't know who's getting it. There's been murmurs of Gaethje, setting up a Gaethje title fight with Ilia at MSG later on this year in November. Obviously, you have Arman Sarukian waiting in the wings, regardless of how the UFC might feel about him, a lot of fans do still believe, and I do myself, that he's earned his title shot. He was also the backup fighter for the Charles Ilia fight. So I think the UFC is also kind of, starting to forgive him a little bit. They put him in the opportunity to at least show that he can make 155 for a championship weight. And then the last one that you could probably run with Max at this point, outside of those two, and it wouldn't even be for a BMF, I think it'd be for a title contender, would be Paddy Pimblett versus Holloway, just because a win on Paddy Pimblett over Max Holloway would boost him to get a title shot. I think we'd all sit here and agree it's okay. If he beats Max Holloway, he's going to be ranked, number 3 or number 2 now in the lightweight division. Paddy will have earned the title fight, against Ilia, depending on the outcome. Obviously, if Justin Gaethje somehow goes out there and beats Ilia Topuria, then I don't even know. But the history's there, the beef is there, and Paddy does need one more high-level win in the lightweight to get that title shot. And I think Max would be a good stepping stone for him / good competitive fight to prove that he's actually earned his spot in the lightweight division.
Yeah, Son, you were right on that partially torn esophagus is what it was. So I tip my cap there. But yeah, in my opinion, the biggest loser of this BMF title fight this past weekend was Justin Gaethje. His shots at a title, I think, just got absolutely shattered. I don't think he can get it now, or really even have too good of an argument after we saw him get fucked up for 5 rounds and then viciously KO'd by Max Holloway. So I think Justin Gaethje can almost kiss that title shot goodbye for his next fight. And if that means that he's not fighting anymore, then maybe that's what that kid means. So maybe the fans are the biggest loser here. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it. You guys hit on my other points, but
yeah, I
Max
add
is just straight up retiring people at this point. It's gonna be him, Justin Gaethje, and maybe Charles if they fight.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to touch on, just because I've seen it in the media. Obviously, Ilia flashes that BMF belt, which personally I don't have a problem with. He knocked out the BMF champ. But the one reason I would like to see a Max Ilia 2 is just to kind of have that be gone. Because if Max fights Charles, they both got knocked out by Ilia. How are one of them going to have the belt when Ilia knocked them both out? So I think the only true, Max, if he gets the title shot, I don't think anyone's oh my God, that fight sucks. But I think it would solidify Ilia if he wins as the BMF, and we could stop this the 2 different belts here. Because it's kind of hard to say anyone's the BMF in UFC right now other than Ilia Topuria.
Yeah, no, look, you bring up a good point, just because also that belt's just not linear in the slightest. It started out at welterweight with Masvidal and Nate Diaz, and then obviously Kamaru Usman goes out a fight after that and starches Jorge Masvidal, but doesn't get the BMF belt. Yeah. And then Jorge Masvidal doesn't defend that belt once, it's vacated, and then moved on to what's called Justin Gaethje and Poirier, and then I guess Gaethje technically does defend it, and then it's just stupid in my opinion. I get its purpose in terms of just being able to put on 2 championship caliber fighters when you don't have a title shot actually in contention. But other than that, there's no linearity to it. It's just
just in a weird spot right now. Obviously, I love that Max the BMF. I think that's cool, but at the same time, I do see Ilia's point. For argument's sake,
knocked him out.
Yeah, and then if he fights Charles and it's that's the BMF, Ilia's gonna be going crazy on Twitter. So
what if Charles somehow locks him an armbar or something and submits Max, and Ilia's all right, dude, I fucking knocked that guy out cold in 2 minutes, or what are my kids doing out here fighting for a BMF belt? So I agree. I think Max should fight Ilia, unite those belts, and then they just kill off the BMF if Ilia starches them. I don't really know what would happen. But
I think the BMF belt kind of got out of hand, When it was beginning, it was almost like a symbolic thing, like, oh, this guy's sick. We'll give it to him. Now it's like kind of being fought after something that's kind of sought after a lot more, by the fighters than by the fans, because I think it's just kind of confusing the fans. I don't think it has really too much of a longer future in the UFC if it keeps going like this. I mean, at this point, it's kind of just like, a fake belt for not the top contenders.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the top contenders, but just not for
Right,
people
but
that
not
hold
the
an actual
champion. Yeah.
Yeah.
If they're planning to keep that belt around, the fight to make is Dan Hooker, in my opinion. I don't see any other guy who has that repertoire at this point in their career like Max does, other than Dan Hooker. He's been in wars. I mean, arguably the best fight ever Dan Hooker's been involved in. So
Yeah,
I would be down for that fight too.
I agree there, definitely. But moving on to the co-main event, Paulo Costa proved three of us wrong and went out there looking like vintage Paulo Costa. He pressured Roman Kopylov forward constantly. He was diverse with his striking. He looked great. I'm going to be completely honest. It was the Paulo Costa of old. And now the question poses itself, what is next for Paulo Costa? And in my opinion here, there really is no answer until a few more fights play out, one of which being Hamzat Chimaev versus Dricus du Plessis. If DDP is able to beat Hamzat Chimaev, I really think you make that Hamzat Chimaev versus Paulo Costa fight next. Paulo Costa has revealed some of the stuff that Hamzat has said to his girlfriend. He's like, how are you with this guy? He's into black men and sent a picture of Israel Adesanya humping Paulo Costa. Like, geez, man, that wouldn't sit well with me if I was Paulo Costa, and it clearly hasn't. So you have that option. Then you also have potentially the loser of Robert Whitaker versus Renier de Ridder, which is happening this upcoming weekend. But with that being said, I digress. San, I know you were on Paulo Costa during this fight, so I'll kick this over to you to give your opinions on this fight and potential next matchups.
Yeah, thanks. It kind of really went how I was kind of expecting it to go. Obviously hindsight's kind of 2020, but I think I did call a lot of things out that did go on this weekend. We saw him kind of go out for the knockout more. He wasn't as scared as he was in the Strickland fight, for example. He really looked like a confident Paulo Costa that, we remember walking in that octagon and knocking everybody out, right? Right about till he got that Adesanya fight. I mean, he was pretty scary. He was, people saw him in the same way that, we saw Alex Pereira in his reign, maybe not to the absolute peak, but, that same scary factor that he brings. He was, I mean, even, Yoel Romero, he put on a great fight against Yoel Romero, almost knocked him out. And Yoel Romero was kind of the boogeyman at the time as well. So that's a guy that, that's a Paulo Costa I remember. And I think, while we weren't exactly at that point this weekend, we definitely saw him get that confidence boost that he needs. And I think he looked good enough this weekend to where if Chimaev loses that fight, against DDP and in a convincing way too. I mean, if DDP can just, stuff all his takedowns and, maybe even get a finish that night, I can see that fight for sure happening. Now I do kind of have a little bit of a problem with, just the top of this division, because it's a lot of older guys that are kind of up and down. Obviously Whitaker's back, but he kind of lost. I mean, he lost pretty bad to Hamzat. Cannonier's the guy that's up and down. Delee's the guy that's up and down. Obviously you have Caio Borralho. But he's going to fight Imavov. So those are really the only two guys that are on the, upslope heavy other than Chimaev. And you got, Strickland, Adesanya, and, everybody else between that is kind of just, a guy that's going up and down and doesn't really have an exactly solid spot right now. And, with Paulo Costa's uptrend, I think we can definitely see that Hamzat fight. Now I think anybody that's ranked before him, I think Marvin Vettori kind of, I think, Paulo's going to end up taking his spot in the rankings. Obviously Brendan Allen's moving up as well, but, yeah, I'm having a tough time matchmaking here. I don't think they'll put him up against Renier de Ridder, although I could see it maybe down the line a little bit more. But I'm really looking forward to that Chimaev fight. I love a bad blood fight.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what they do with Paulo Costa after this one, I think there's like a good amount of ways you can go here. I think even if Hamzat fights DDP and loses, I don't know if they're going to jump the rankings right now. Hamzat's ranked 3, and going into that fight, Paulo Costa was ranked 13th, and he fought 14th ranked Roman Cop. It's just such a jump. I know the history's there, but it's like also Hamzat's been like firing shots at like every single person that's like ranked in the middleweight division. I mean, he has like a comment for Sean Strickland. It seems like every other day on Twitter. I don't know if any of you guys have seen that, but he's just always trying to go back and forth with Sean Strickland. So, I mean, depending on the outcome of that fight, obviously if DDP wins that, you could run a Hamzat Strickland, you could run a Hamzat Costa. Even if Hamzat wins, I think what you'll see next is the winner of Nasruddin Imavov and then Kyle Baralho. And then outside of that, I'd assume the UFC would probably do like an Izzy Strickland 2 for like a title contender bout. And then based off the winner of that, I could see them fighting Hamzat, Imavov, or Baralho, whoever holds the belt at that time. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's just going to be like the stack in order. And then some other notable matchups here for Paulo Costa. I like that you touched on the winner of Whitaker, or the loser of Whitaker, De Ridder, which is coming up this Saturday. The only problem I have with that is say Whitaker loses, it's like you really want to run the Whitaker Paulo Costa fight back. It kind of puts him in a tough place. I like the Rainier De Ridder fight. In terms of other ones, you have Jared Cannonier ranked 7. It's a good stepping stone if Paulo Costa wants to get back into title contention fights. He's going to need, I think, 1 or 2 more. Jared Cannonier at 7 gets him up in the rankings, and then you could fight the loser of Imavov, Baralho, something along those lines, or maybe even Paulo Costa at that point when they're both kind of similarly ranked. I mean, sky's the limit. I'm happy to see Paulo Costa turn around. I mean, he was working the body of Kopylov to no end. Those body kicks were like making me grimace when I was at the bar watching the fight. And like, I just have to assume that he broke a couple of ribs, if not more, bruised kidneys, the whole 9. Great fight. In terms of what you do with Kopylov now, Abus Magomedov is ranked number 15. I like that fight. I think that's the fight they should run next for him. Keep him in the rankings still. I'm sure he still will be. Maybe a Gauthier fight. See if they want to boost him, get him into the rankings as soon as possible. If that's a guy they want to really boost for the title, you could do him versus Kopylov or him versus Abumedamedov. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think you guys really hit on everything. Yeah, props to you, Son. That was a great call. I know we were all kind of skeptical, and especially as I think we forget when we dropped the pod. But then the press conference when Paulo was like shaking the whole time, I was like, Roman's got this. But yeah, I think it's a good day in the UFC when Paulo Costa's winning. That's how I feel. I feel like it's just better for the overall sport. He's good on the mic. He's good with the fans. So I'm happy to see him back in the win column. I bet against him, picked against him, but kind of one where you tip the cap and you're happy to see him get back in the win column. Yeah, I think he's in a spot where he just kind of gets to wait a little bit, see what happens this weekend. I do like the Whitaker fight, especially being 2 older gentlemen in the division. I think that's just like a legacy fight. But yeah, obviously with DDP comes out coming up, I think he's in a good spot to kind of wait a little bit, maybe a month or 2 before he gets the next scheduled fight, and we see what happens.
And another thing to note is you do have Roman Dolidze scheduled to fight Fluffy Hernandez at the Apex early August. So, I mean, depending on how that fight goes, you can kind of play that either way as well, where those are 2 names, the timelines match up similarly. I don't know exactly what they want to do with Paulo Costa, but just something to keep in mind there with those similar timelines. And moving on to the next fight, we have a fight of the night candidate. Daniel Rodriguez took out Kevin Holland. And yeah, man, to be completely honest, Kevin Holland's just one of those guys that you can't trust because skill for skill, he is way more skilled than Daniel Rodriguez. He should be more skilled on the feet, but he just lets himself get hit. He put himself in a bad positions and he paid the price for it, man. And I think it's kind of as simple as that. His fight IQ wasn't necessarily there. And then I know it was 3rd round and he was extremely tired, but when he had D-Rod hurt, it seemed like he was trying to throw like flying knees instead of maybe attacking the body, throwing an elbow up top, fucking some straight shots to the head. I don't know why the flying knees are what you got to go to there, Kevin Holland, but that was a loss that disappointed me. I was pretty bullish on Kevin Holland this past weekend, but with that being said, Ryan, I'm going to pass the baton over to you to give your thoughts on that one and maybe some potential what's next for both these guys.
Yeah, I mean, no, credit to D-Rod. It was like one of those things, right? I mean, I think round 1 could have gone either way there. So like when I was thinking that fight was called. I genuinely didn't know who won because, you had round 2 where D-Rod dropped Kevin Holland twice and hurt him badly. But Kevin Holland recovered well. I think he ended up on top at the end of that round, got some ground and pound off. And you go into round 2 and Kevin Holland drops D-Rod. So, you know what I mean? Like, while D-Rod maybe ended the fight on top, yeah, I think that was a clear Kevin Holland round 3. And then it just came down to how you scored round 1. And if you looked at the Twitter board, what they had during the fight, that was split 50-50 across the board. Everyone was just going Kevin Holland round 1, just outworked him a little bit. And I was on that side as well, but, I'm not going to go out there and call that a robbery. I think D-Rod, just fought well, stuck to the game plan. And I think Kevin Holland could have just done a little more, especially when D-Rod, it seemed like he was just blitzing with his head down, just trying to get those things. And Kevin Holland was moving on the back foot, but not throwing anything. And, I forget who brought it up, but they were saying it's like when you move backwards in MMA like that, there's a cage behind. You're eventually going to hit the cage, and that's where D-Rod was able to just land a couple big shots that stole him rounds, and it looks good to the judges. And like you touched on, Zach, it's just the inconsistency of Kevin Holland, but I think that also comes with fighting 5 times a year and making 170 pounds, for like the 4th or 5th time in 12 months. It takes a toll on your body, and you're not, and you have to I think we have to keep in mind now, especially if he plans on fighting again this year, 1 or 2 more times, he's going to be weathered. You don't give your body ample time to recover enough from a weight cut and also going through 15 minutes of war 4 times in 7 months. But in terms of who they fight next, I don't know if they'll put D-Rod with someone ranked within welterweight, because I think Kevin Holland is coming in at 14, so D-Rod will be ranked come tomorrow. It's hard to say. Kevin Holland, who knows who the hell they'll put up against him. I'm sure they'll just call him on short notice and he'll fill in for some rising prospect. You never know with him. But yeah, D-Rod, I guess he'll start looking upwards towards the rankings for a title shot. So I don't know, maybe like the loser of Jeff Neal, Carlos Prates, that could be one. But I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head who's ranked, like in that 15 through 12 spot at welterweight right now.
Yeah, for personally, it's just like I don't think I could continue to bet on Kevin Holland, just because every time I do put money on him, he loses, and every time I pick against him, he wins. So it's like inverse correlation with him. I thought it was a banger, great fight. Just props to D-Rod, man. I think everyone across MMA was counting him out. I don't even know, doesn't have it right here on Tapology, but like the amount of people who picked it. Yeah, 96% of people on Tapology out of 7,000 were on Holland. That's crazy percentages. And he just showed what he's showed his whole career, just pure grit, staying in the pocket, fighting his fight, but also, getting in trouble with Kevin Holland and being able to survive. It's just such a huge accomplishment in that fight and getting his hand raised. And, he's on a little run here back in the old age of 3 straight wins. Like you said, he might move into the rankings. So we'll see what's next for him, but it's just awesome to see, a vet of the UFC kind of put on a show his last 3 fights, getting the win column 3 times, and be able to, ride off into the sunset whenever he does deserve to hang it up. So, props to D-Rod there.
Yeah, man, that was a good old-fashioned California squabble, man. Both guys out of Cali. It was it looked like a little territory war going on out there. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really much to say. Definitely, I mean, Kevin Holland, it's almost like he doesn't take every single fight as seriously as the last one. He starts getting on a win streak, and then he gets a little bit too overconfident, thinks he can taunt in there. I know he was talking. He's getting kind of silly after that first round, so that shit just catches up to you. If he ever wants to lock in, I'm sure he could be a top welterweight. But I think, the time's almost passing at this point for him to, start taking the fight seriously. It did look like he was kind of just button mashing out there. He definitely could have got a finish done, and got Daniel Rodriguez out of there. He definitely had the opportunity. But of course he was tired. I mean, they were both going back and forth, and he got dropped pretty early. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, though, I will say, as far as rankings, I wouldn't be surprised if Daniel Rodriguez didn't get brought up in the rankings, just because of kind of the nature of the fight, and kind of how it went. It was, definitely some well-placed shots in the beginning, to drop, or I guess in the second round to drop Kevin Holland. But, it's just kind of one of those things like, yeah, Kevin Holland was obviously messing around out there and thought he had an easy win. So I wouldn't be surprised if not. But if he does get a next fight, kind of hate to say it, but I think MVP would be a good fight. I mean, that's two guys with really good striking, really good output, and obviously a very big jump in skill. But I think that'd be a good fight. I saw you kind of wince it a little bit, Zach, but I do think it'd be good. I think just the striking battle, getting him in front of somebody that could potentially knock him out, would be a good test for Daniel Rodriguez if he's really on a run right now.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like an MVP matchup, and I just kind of see MVP just being MVP and dancing around him for 15 minutes where I'm kind of watching it like, all right, like you are very good, Michael Venom Page, but I'm getting a little, I mean, I think you just outpoint him. But I don't know. I'm not too bullish on MVP. Like I like the guy, but I don't. Whenever I hear his name, I'm kind of just like, all right, whatever, man.
The MVP matchup actually reminds me he's supposed to fight Jared Cannonier later this year. So I think MVP's pretty much confirmed, moved up to middleweight at this point.
Yeah, I do think D-Rod will find his way into the rankings. I mean, Holland was ranked 13th. Like I think it would just be a little bit like just a slap in the face. Fuck you to not put him in the rankings, and he is on a 3-fight win streak. So I think they kind of like almost have to. Yeah. And then you kind of look at the rankings there, and it's like 9-10, you got Colby Covington and Gilbert Burns. I don't see Colby Covington taking the fight. Maybe Alderino would take the fight. I don't know. It's tough because then you look at Carlos Prates, Jeff Neal, like you touched on, Ryan, and I don't know how long it's going to take for Jeff Neal to be ready to fight, or even Carlos Prates to be ready to fight after that, because that's going to be just violence. So, yeah, I mean, it is kind of tough to play matchmaker there.
That's the only one I think ranked 14 now after last week. Gabriel Bonfim. I think that makes most sense. You have the number 13 and number 14th ranked guy, potentially, depending on where they put Kevin Holland in the rankings. The Gabriel Bonfim fight seems like it would be a good test for Daniel Rodriguez at this point. Like you said, he's on a 3-fight win streak, but he's also old. He's been ranked before in the welterweight division, wasn't able to really move up. So I know the UFC is going to be pretty tentative about trying to rush him to a title shot. So I think they're going to still try to use him as a stepping stone for some of these up-and-coming prospects, that are just finally cracking the rankings. So, I wouldn't be surprised if Gabriel Bonfim's his next opponent.
Yeah, I like that call out there. And if no one else has anything, let's move on. Next up, we got Patricio Pitbull picking up his first UFC win over Dan Ige. Pitbull looked pretty good. Ige started to figure him out come round 3, really, and I think Ige won that 3rd round. And then you kind of look at it and you go, all right, what's next for Patricio Pitbull? Because he's no young dog or anything, man. I mean, he's up there. I think he's 38, 39. And a name that I've heard thrown around for him a little bit is Lerone Murphy. That's a guy up in the rankings. I know Lerone Murphy's kind of calling, like, I should be in the title contention. I think a win over the 2-division Bellator champ Patricio Pitbull puts him in a position to be up there fighting for the belt. And also for Pitbull, that's a big step up in the rankings and propels you that much closer to a title shot. So personally, I like that Lerone Murphy fight for Pitbull. I know, again, Murphy might be tentative to take it, but that's kind of where my mind goes as far as that fight. And Luke, I kind of want to hear your thoughts on this one next.
Yeah, I think overall it's just what we expected out of Pitbull in that Yair fight. Just showed his, why he's known as one of the best practitioners of mixed martial arts. Total masterclass in my opinion. Obviously, Dan Ige had some success. He's a dog. He stayed in that fight the whole time. But I just thought it was a masterclass by Pitbull. I think if I'm remembering correctly when we were talking about this, I was like, this one's hard for me to pick. I'm just going with the UFC guy, especially after the performance against Yair from Pitbull. But man, he looked good. And yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I don't think he's ranked right now. I'm not seeing him on the top 15. But I think you throw him up there. I mean, there's so many guys at the top. I don't know if Ortega or Arnold Allen have fights lined up, but this is a guy the UFC is not going to mess around with, fighting at the bottom of the rankings. He's old, like you said, and he still has that caliber where he could hang with everyone. We saw it in the Yair fight. Obviously, Yair won that, but he hung around in that fight and had some moments at the end. I was really impressed with Pitbull. I think he looked great. And props to Dan Ige, man. He's tough as nails, tough as they come. But yeah, Pitbull, I can't wait to see what they have next for him. I wouldn't be surprised if he's fighting someone in the top 7.
Yeah, definitely. That was an awesome comeback for Pitbull. I mean, obviously he was leading the whole fight, but I mean, comeback is in getting a win in the UFC. I think for anybody, it doesn't matter how good you are as a prospect. If you come into UFC and your first fight is Yair Rodriguez, odds are, I mean, all odds are against you, man. I mean, that's a guy that's, extra tall, extra lengthy, can pull any strike out of the bag at any time. And Patricio actually, he kept up with him pretty well. And I want to say he dropped him. I can't fully recall. He didn't
he
fully,
landed like 15
stumble.
6 strikes. It was like something. He landed like
I
15
thought
6
he
strikes in
like
that
kind of
fight.
stumbled him a little bit, not
He had a
dropped.
takedown at the end too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, Pitbull got dropped in that fight by Yair.
Yeah, maybe
But
maybe I'm misrecalling here, but he did keep up in that fight, and obviously it's your UFC debut fight while you're 37, 38 years old, fighting a younger guy that is Yair Rodriguez. So obviously that fight didn't go his way, but this weekend was huge for him, I think. I mean, after that Diego Lopez fight, I think Dan Ige gained a lot of people's respect. He gained, a lot of matchmakers' respect. Even this weekend, I mean, Dan Ige showed how tough he was. He took some pretty big, heavy shots. I think one thing to note is Pitbull and Ige are both they're built pretty similarly. Body size wise, length wise, size wise. So I think really that's where the expertise came into play. It's like fighting yourself in a mirror, 5 years ago, right? You're just gonna know more, and the guys kind of move pretty similar and they fight pretty similar. So definitely right for Pitbull to get the nod there, and it did really well in the fight. I don't know who you put him against though. I have a really tough time calling this one out. Obviously, there's a lot of guys in that division that are booked right now. One thing that kind of jumps out at me a little bit is Arnold Allen, and I say that only because he hasn't really fought in a while. He fought last year, about a year ago now, a little bit more than a year ago, I think, at this point. And I don't think he's booked for anything. And to me, he's just ranked a little bit, higher because Gene Silva's coming up. There's a lot of older guys on their way down, and he hasn't really been as active as these other guys. Although Arnold Allen is a really good, tough, true test, and I don't know if he's gonna, even accept the fight against Pitbull. But that's a name that's kind of I've been looking at for a while now. When we do these recap videos all year, when we're in that weight division, I just really don't know what to do with Arnold Allen, and I feel like we always call for him to get in a fight, and it just never seems, to get booked. So. I'm interested to see what they will do with Arnold Allen, but as far as Pitbull, I think they just fight somebody above Ige, and give him a bigger chance to keep moving up in those rankings.
Yeah, like you said, you guys touched on a lot of it there. I mean, credit to Patricio Pitbull. It's like a bittersweet win. It's like Ige's a fan favorite. You always root for the guy when he goes out, and I think it just came down to a case where he was just slow to get into it. So Pitbull was able to get those first 2 rounds over him, and in a 3-round fight, as long as you're not getting finished in the third, you're going to win that on the judges' scorecards every time. But, credit to Ige. He did, like you touched on, Zach. He picked it up in the 3rd round, was able to get that 3rd round. But it was just a slow start for Ige that night. But also very happy to see Patricio Pitbull prove to everyone and all the doubters that he does, in fact, belong with the cream of the crop, in the featherweight division of the UFC. And then, like you touched on, Luke, they're not going to slow roll Pitbull. It's not going to be like the way they did with Asakura in the flyweight division, where they immediately give him a title shot. But I could see, like you touched on, Son. Arnold Allen's a good one. He's ranked number 4 right now. That would probably propel him in the title shot contention. But then again, it's like you're still going to be playing the waiting game if you're Patricio Pitbull, depending on the outcome of Diego Lopez and Gene Silva. And then obviously a year to loss to Yair, who's ranked 3 right now. He'll be making a case. You have Aljamain Sterling, who's ranked number 7, but he's booked against number 4 Brian Ortega. So I think, in this case, the only 2 matchups that make sense if you want to propel this guy into title shot contention are Lerone Murphy and Arnold Allen. I don't see them giving him like a Yusuf Zalal and slow rolling him up into the rankings, who's ranked number 9. You might be able to argue with Josh Emmett, who's ranked number 8 right now, but I think in this case, given the age being like a big factor here, Arnold Allen and Lerone Murphy make the most sense. And then in terms of Dan Ige, his next fight, you could put him against Steve Garcia, who just cracked into the rankings after his win last week against Calvin Kattar. You could do David Onama, who's been waiting in the wings. Or Yusuf Zalal. Those are pretty much it. Those guys still need to kind of prove themselves. So I think those are good fights for the loser of that one.
Yeah, I agree there. And kind of one more thing I want to touch on before we move on here. I went over Dan Ige. While it's a good win, let's not act like it's a top win by any means. Dan Ige is like a gateway into the top 10. I mean, he has losses to Calvin Kattar, Sean Sung Jung, Josh Emmett, Mozvar Evloev, Bryce Mitchell, Diego Lopez, Lerone Murphy. So it's like we want to talk well on Pitbull, and hats off for the win here. But going back to that fight against Yair quadrupled his 6 strikes. It's like I just don't think Pitbull at this age is really like championship caliber, but I do think it's a good idea to go and push him out against Lerone Murphy. Maybe he proves me wrong, picks up a win, and then can fast track. But yeah, let's move on from there. Moving on to the opener on the main card, we had Michael Johnson pull off probably the biggest upset on the card. Kind of had to be. He was like plus 600 against the Mexican Daniel Zellhuber, and he just showed his veteranship there. He's shown that he's been there. He's been there and he's done it for so long. He's fought the who's who of this division. And at 39, he could still go out there and get the job done. Very impressive win by Michael Johnson. Daniel Zellhuber, I don't think he's completely chalked as far as a prospect goes. I think he showed resilience. He looked good in that 3rd round when he started realizing he could utilize those kicks a little bit more. He should have been throwing those at the body all fight, in my opinion. But again, hats off to Michael Johnson. And San, I'll toss this one over to you to give your opinions on this fight.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty big on Zellhuber, and I think I've been pretty big on him, for a lot of his career. I think he's a great fighter. He's got the good length for that, weight class, and I think he's got all the physical advantages that he needs, as well as the skills that he needs. But it just didn't seem like he was there. I mean, it was pretty disappointing to watch in general. I was expecting a lot more output out of him. I was expecting a lot more confidence out of him. I thought, by now he would have figured out a few more things, being the great prospect that he is. But it just wasn't there. It was kind of like, it almost felt like a Kevin Holland fight, at some point where, you watch his last fight, or you know what he can do in the past, and you know what he's done in the past and the guys that he's beat. But he just didn't show up. Maybe it's just a confidence thing. Maybe something happened that brought his confidence down. Maybe it was something else. To me, it looked more mental than physical. Because we did see, those flashier strikes towards the end of the fight. But he just didn't show up, and he didn't have the output that we expected. And he didn't get as crafty as we would expect him to be, especially with such a big height and reach advantage there. He just didn't look like the guy that we expected him to look like out there. So I'll leave the rest up to you guys, but I was definitely disappointed. But I do know at my table, my buddy was like, "This is a big underdog fight here for whatever reason." Ended up betting on Michael Johnson there and making a good bit of cheddar. I will say I lost a good bit of cheddar on that Zellhuber fight, so I wasn't too stoked about it.
No, son, I mean, I definitely agree with you. It was a very tentative display out of Zellhuber, but I think that comes down to getting dropped in round 2. I mean, Michael Johnson caught him, and then after that, I mean, even before then, he was mixing it up a little bit in round 1, throwing shots to the body, up to the head, punching-wise. And it seems like after he got dropped for, like, a majority of the rest of that fight, it was just solely body kicks and head kicks, which were all just getting blocked by Michael Johnson. I was hating the commentary on that one just because they kept like glazing the kicks. They're like, "Oh, that's going to wear out Michael Johnson's arms." But clearly Michael Johnson was winning that fight, and they're just giving no credit to the guy. They're like Michael Johnson's arms have to be destroyed after absorbing all these kicks. And it's like, yeah, but maybe touch on the fact that the only thing Zellhuber is doing in this fight is throwing kicks. Meanwhile, you have Michael Johnson, who just dropped the guy, throwing punches up top, a little bit of ground control, punches to the body, mixing it up, leg kicks, just showing like a full display of striking against the guy who everyone said that he was outmatched and outclassed against. But in terms of Zellhuber, I think, it's another one of those losses where like you pick up on it. I mean, obviously, like he just lost to Esteban Ribovics back at UFC Noche, but that's another young up and coming prospect. This time, he faces the veteran Michael Johnson, but Zellhuber is only 26 years old. He has all the physical gifts, like you touched on, San, to be a dominant force in that weight class. I mean, he looked huge going into that fight. When they were actually fighting in the octagon, Zellhuber, you could tell, he's a big guy, not just lanky, has like the muscle and the size to carry himself forward in that division. And like I said, he's only 26 years old. So maybe switch gyms, get out of Extreme Couture. I mean, they had a rough night between Dan Ige, him, and so there was another fighter that lost on that card that was from Extreme Couture. I'm just blanking on his name. But I'd say switch gyms. That'd be my only advice there.
Yeah, I think you guys really hit on it. I think we all expected a little bit more to Zellhuber there, but I agree. I don't think we should be counting him out as a prospect. Michael Johnson has been in there with killers his whole career, and his career is long. He's almost 40 years old. Um, Kind of like the same thing with Costa and D-Rod here. Like this was the card for older guys in the UFC. Michael Johnson has now won his last three, I think 4 out of his last 5. So he's on a little bit of a roll here too. And yeah, he could play spoiler for a whole bunch of prospects coming up in this division. Just showed, I think it was just showing the veteranship here in this fight, man. It seems like everything, like you guys touched on, the high kicks are getting blocked. He kind of knew what was coming, was well prepared for this fight. He looked good. The stamina lasted. And he's a threat no matter how old he is. You know, the power's the last thing to go. Obviously, he dropped Zellhuber in this fight, but I could see him getting a couple more wins, a couple maybe knockouts against prospects coming up, and being a problem for a couple more years, man. It's great to see these old guys really not, turning it over to the young guys just yet in this sport.
And it is crazy. Like, I feel like a lot of people forgot like who Michael Johnson is and who he's beaten. You go through him, and he has wins over Edson Barboza in 2015. He knocked out Dustin Poirier not too long after that in the first round. And he had that streak where he went and fought Barboza, Beneil Dariush, Nate Diaz, Dustin Poirier, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Justin Gaethje. Like, he's been in there with the best of the best. And like you touched on, Luke, that just showed Saturday night. So hats off to Michael Johnson on that one. And kind of going on to the prelims a little bit. We won't spend too much time here, but I know Vinicius Oliveira has called out both Umar Nurmagomedov and Sugar Sean O'Malley. So, Luke, as the big Sugar fan here, I kind of want to hear your opinions on that call out.
Yeah, I mean, once you win, you could call it whoever you want. I don't think he's there yet. I mean, that first round was kind of crazy. I think there was a lot of wild, strikes being thrown in that first round. And it definitely seemed like Kyler Phillips came out well gassed after that first round, even though I think he won that first round. I bet you guys agree. Yeah, Oliveira looked good. He showed that he could stay in there for 3 rounds of a high paced fight. I do think the callouts are, a little aggressive at this point, a little overzealous. But hey, when you're winning UFC fights, you can call out whoever you want. Not going to sit here and say he can't call out those guys. I don't think those guys are going to be anywhere close to moving down to fight him yet. But yeah, good performance, good win. Would have liked to see a knockout there, but we'll take a decision.
Yeah. No, you got it. You got it.
All right. I was gonna say, strange call outs out there. You're calling out the number 1 and number 2. I love the I love trying to get yourself propelled up to one fight outside of a title in this division, but I would have loved to have heard this because like Song Yadong, Davison Figueiredo ranked 5 and 6 respectively, even a Marlon Vera ranked 7. I think he'll be ranked number 12 after this week. You know what I mean? Like smart. I love when people call out crazy, just have crazy call outs, but I like smarter call outs better. And I think Vinicius Oliveira had an opportunity to actually secure himself a fight against a number 6 ranked Davison Figueiredo, who's we've seen starting to slow down between his Marlon Vera fight and his Corey Sandhagen fight, where he didn't look the best. I think if you're in Vinicius Oliveira's position, you kind of want that Davison Figueiredo fight immediately, just because, like I said, his last performance wasn't great. He's getting up there in age, and it's a very winnable fight for him. So in terms of what's next, if they want to rush Vinicius Oliveira to a title shot, I think Davison Figueiredo is the better opponent for him.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a wasted opportunity. I mean, I fully agree with you, Ryan. That's something that, I think, Hakeem Buckley did that once, where he called out McGregor once, and it's just like, this was like the week after, like 2 weeks after Michael Chandler had called him out. So it was just like completely out of line, like didn't really make sense. Obviously, I have my 2 cents on Sugar Sean. I don't think he should be ranked that high, but I also don't think he's nearly on the same level as Vinicius Oliveira is right now. I think Sean O'Malley, would be I mean, the way that Vinicius was getting touched up this weekend, I think Sean O'Malley could definitely take advantage of it, and we could see a quick finish out of him. Now, something that I do think is very attainable for him, it makes sense, and it would propel him to, within 2 fights of a title shot, is a Mario Bautista matchup. I don't know if Bautista's matched up against anybody right now, but he's on a heater. He's been fighting really well. He's been fighting really good fights, and has had his respective wins at that. And he's ranked number 8 right now,
Yep.
just before Marlon Vera. You got Rob Font, Cejudo, Zahabi, Kyler Phillips, McGee, Montel Jackson. I just don't see them wasting Vinicius Oliveira's time fighting those guys. I think it would just kind of be a slow roll that just wouldn't be worth it right now. Not that I think, he might not, win every single one of those fights, but I do think that it's kind of just a waste of time for the fans too. They're kind of just, not super exciting. You need at least, one A side on that side of the negotiation. So I think a perfect fight, if he could secure it, would be Mario Bautista. It will shoot him, I think above an 8 in the rankings if he won convincingly. But as of right now, going for some of the best strikers in the division, when you got touched up pretty bad in your last fight, is kind of, a wasted opportunity for sure.
Yeah, well, he definitely won't be fighting Kyler Phillips since he just beat him, on Saturday. But jokes aside, I just don't know if I see him, because Mario Bautista obviously just took the chance fighting the Patchy Mix. He just did the UFC a favor fighting Patchy Mix outside of the rankings. So I feel like Mario Bautista will have to fight up. I don't know if they make that. I don't know when Figgy's going to come back from that injury, because Corey Sandhagen did pop his knee. So I don't know if he's going to be ready anytime, like relatively soon. So my mind kind of goes to that Cheeto Vera fight. I think it's a pretty good matchup too. I think Cheeto likes getting hit in the face, and Vinicius likes hitting people in the face. So I think that fight can make a lot of sense, and that's kind of where my mind goes. But moving on from there, we won't spend too much time. But Brennan Allen, Marvin Vettori fight of the night. That was a banger. Brennan Allen just bested him in the striking, his jiu-jitsu. I mean, Marvin Vettori looked pretty good on the ground actually against the BJJ black belt. I don't know if anyone has too much to want to add in there, but outside of that, obviously you have Atiba Gutierrez, who looked absolutely amazing. He had that minute or so knockout performance bonus. Hats off to him. I know you touched on some potential matchups earlier for him, Ryan. And then obviously a guy who sounds very high on, Islam Dulatov, with a very impressive performance himself with the round 1 knockout. So that's kind of it on my end. If you guys have anything to add, feel free to hop on in.
Yeah, no, nothing crazy. Just again, reiterating Dulatov. I think we're all pretty high on him. I think, he obviously he's a contender series guy. He's had some really impressive wins, and I'm very excited to see what that guy's going to do. He's kind of just a sick fighter to root for. He's got some of that. He's got a little bit of star power to him. I think just with what he does outside of the UFC.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think in his post-fight interview, he said he has a modeling gig. He had a modeling gig today, so he's pretty happy. He didn't have to, wear any makeup, get touched up for that. He walked out clean, so good for him.
Yeah, and the only thing to add on my end is, Vettori Allen fight. That was a great fight. I am just so surprised they did not give fight of the night to DP and Max Holloway. Just I didn't think the Vettori Brennan Allen fight was that significantly better than a couple other fights on the main card, that it was like, oh, we're not going to give it to Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway. In my opinion, I am biased. I understand that. But yeah, I saw the video of Max and DP kind of being pissed off after. But
yeah, I think I was genuinely shocked they didn't give it to Kevin Holland and D-Rod.
100% too,
yeah. That was like the one I figured, okay, that's I was like, if Dustin and Max tops this, and this is going to be one of the better cards of the year. I mean, to be fair, it was. There were so many finishes on that card. You had the first chick fight, Judas knocks her opponent out, and then then you just go round one sub, KO. Now I was like, this is shaping up, and then obviously Marvin Vettori, Brennan Allen put on a war. Vinicius Oliveira has his way with Kyler Phillips. Michael Johnson shocks the world, getting his decision win. And then, Patricio Pitbull shows he belongs in the UFC. D-Rod and Kevin Holland go to war. Paulo Costa, once again, shocks the world, shows that he belongs. Just a nasty performance out of him, just brutalizes Roman Kopylov. And then you go into the main event, 2 knockdowns there as well. Very competitive fight. Max points to the ground, rips a bunch of clean body shots, drops Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier drops him back. Very good card in my opinion. I was personally trashing this card going into it. It's like, didn't think it was like all that, especially for a guy like Dustin Poirier to be his retirement fight, but it exceeded potential. It exceeded expectations, and I was very happy overall on Saturday night.
Yeah, definitely. That was a good recap of the card there, Ryan. And I'm happy you mentioned Carly Judice, because I wanted to say something so no one thinks I'm sexist or anything. She also got a very well-deserved fight bonus there, performance of the night. So hats off to her. And yeah, this was one hell of a card.
Yeah.
And with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. We will be back soon with a preview card for this upcoming fight night in Saudi Arabia. But yeah, thank you all.